Welcome back to another episode of Running the Wasatch 100. It's I don't want to say beautiful day in the Wasatch because it's super hazy. We've got some fire smoke. But I am really excited for our guest today, who's a very accomplished ultra runner, very accomplished at the Wasatch 100. I believe he's got 4 cheetah belt buckles. And he knows what he's doing. So I'm very excited to hear from Erik Storheim today. Erik, how you doing?
Doing great. It's a beautiful morning. Good day to be out.
And he's also my dentist. So if you want a really classy smile, you're accepting patients?
Always accepting good patients.
Okay, great. The topic for today is how to run a faster, more efficient Wasatch. And there's a reason why I wanted Erik to be with me on this episode, because he has demonstrated that he's been able to do that. Okay, so Erik, what is something that on your first Wasatch you feel like you failed, or it was something you learned a lesson because you didn't do it very well?
My first Wasatch, I think nutrition, I didn't really understand. And in 2005, nutrition definitely was different than it is these days. It was more basic. But I basically ran the first 60 or 70 miles eating like Rice Krispie treats and Little Debbie like oatmeal pies.
Oh my goodness.
And those nutty bars, like the cheapest, crappiest food you could eat. And my family was like, no, we gotta have you eat something better. And that's all I would eat. And I remember my sister-in-law, bless her heart, showed up at Brighton with a Subway chicken breast sandwich, saying I gotta eat something more healthy, and I didn't want to disappoint her. So I took it and I carried it in my right hand for like the next 15 miles, thinking, okay, I'm gonna take a bite for Lindsay. I'm gonna do it.
Oh my gosh, this is hilarious.
And so I finally, at one point, I'm like, I gotta get rid of this. And so I pulled the chicken breast out and had a few bites. That was the end of the Subway sandwich.
Okay, so what was your time that year?
I ran a 24:57-ish, I think, 24:57, just under 25 hours.
Okay, kids, so what I picked up there, what I learned, you want to run a 24-something Wasatch, Little Debbie's and Zingers, the first 60 miles, and ding dongs. Awesome. Okay, Erik, question. If someone you knew got into Wasatch for the first time and asked you, Erik, what advice do you have for me? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
So I was lucky. This wasn't an intentional thing that I did, but I was lucky enough my first Wasatch in 2005 to kind of fall into a group of runners that were awesome mentors. And as I started to run with them, I realized they were really accomplished ultra runners and had done really, really well at Wasatch. And so that really gave me this huge boost of confidence that, not only could I possibly finish the race, but maybe I could actually run it fairly quickly. So my first piece of advice would be to find people who are better and more experienced than you. Not just in running, but that's a good life lesson, just to become better at whatever. But definitely at Wasatch, find someone who has run the course, find someone who's a better runner, who's more experienced and will push you, and then you can, work together to get better. That's my single most beginner important piece of advice.
Erik, so from a course perspective, Wasatch course, what are some tips that you have for being more efficient, things that you have done that have helped you to run the course faster?
There's a lot of them, so I'll hit on a few of them. I think the first thing, and this is for any ultra, any race, is you don't necessarily have to run fast, but you can't slow down. So you just keep a good steady pace. People will say start the course slower, then definitely run slower than you think you should, because it's going to catch up to you. So don't try to set any records in the beginning of the race. That's not where you're going to finish fast. So just take it easy at the start, but then as you keep progressing through the race, just don't slow down. You just kind of keep that same, methodical pace.
Right. From a course, like are there things on the course that you do?
Yeah. Aid stations are the first one. You can waste a lot of time in aid stations, and so always keep moving. Don't sit. I mean, there's times you got to sit down, change your socks, whatever, but don't sit down at an aid station.
Okay, real quick, at Wasatch, are there aid stations where you would take longer? So if you want to go quickly through them, but what aid stations are important, do you think, to maybe take an extra minute to make sure you've got everything you need or your body's taken care of?
Yeah, so typically heading into the Big Mountain aid station, that long section from Sessions Liftoff through Swallow Rocks to Big Mountain is a good time to get dehydrated. And that's a critical section for me. And so I always take a little extra time at Big Mountain to make sure that I'm feeling good. First time I can see my crew and family. So I get a little charge from them, and then just make sure that I have everything that I need, because the next section to Alexander is going to be brutally hot. And you want to make sure that you got everything you need and extra water.
Yeah, I think everybody comes in dehydrated, so.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
And so it's so as far as like course specifics go, definitely the section from Big Mountain to Alexander Springs and Alexander Springs to Lambs Canyon, that is not the time to try to pass people, to try to win the race, to try to run your fastest. That's the time to hydrate. Keep moving efficiently, but make sure you just drink and drink and drink. There was one year between Big Mountain and Alexander, I drank, I drank a 70-ounce reservoir plus two 20-ounce handhelds plus half of my Pacers reservoir. So I probably drank like 100 and something ounces of water, 140 ounces of water in an hour and a half.
So that you probably want to make sure you've got what you need there, right?
Yeah,
when you leave Big Mountain, you've got to be able to carry a lot of water too.
Yep. That's the hottest section of the course, no matter where you are in the race, at the front of the race or towards the back of it. That's going to be the hottest section, and that's the time when you just take time to move efficiently and smoothly,
right?
And stay hydrated.
Any other places on the course, from an aid station perspective, you would take more time?
I typically take a little bit more time at Brighton, obviously. Again, you've got a lot of family, crew, resources, if you're moving well and you want that sub 24, you're coming in there in the late evening. Maybe it's still light, maybe it's just getting dark, and so you got to make sure you have the stuff that you need for the next 30 miles. Headlamp, some warm clothes, that type of thing, because it can be a long night.
Right.
So I take a little extra time to make sure I have everything I need at Brighton.
So
right.
What other things do you do course specific to be faster, more efficient?
So once I've gone through that really kind of furnace area of Alexander Springs to Lambs Canyon, you hit Lambs Canyon and start heading up the Lambs Canyon Road, and it typically starts to cool down. And it's a time when you can start to, again, even though you're moving, it's a time to recover a little bit. And so you can get a little more fuel and start to move a little bit better. So that 2.5, 3 mile road section, I'll power hike it. I won't run it. Make sure I get some calories in me as much as possible. And usually, if I do that, by the time I get to the to the trail going up over Bear Ass Pass, you know, I'm feeling pretty good, and can move really efficiently. My goal on that section to Mill Creek, from Lambs Canyon to Mill Creek, if I'm trying to run a 24-hour pace, is to run that in between 2 hours and 2 hours and 10 minutes, which means you got to move, you got to be moving pretty quick. Again, you don't have to kill yourself though.
Right.
So,
so you mentioned something that you're eating while you're power hiking up the road. Does that mean you don't stop to do that at Lambs? You kind of go through that one quicker?
No, I'll usually take some time at Lambs as well. I mean, again, when I'm saying taking time, I don't want to spend more than 2 or 3 minutes. It's easy to sit down and all of a sudden 10 minutes have gone by, and I have definitely done that. And every time I run the race and I look back at my split times, I go, oh man, I wasted, an hour and a half at aid stations.
Right.
And I could have cut that time in half.
Right.
But in the moment, it's easy to feel crappy and feel like you need a break for a minute and say, oh, cook me a grilled cheese sandwich or something like that.
Yeah,
So,
I think that it's so easy, especially when you got crew there, to linger longer than you need to.
yeah, it definitely happens a lot more when you have crew than when you don't have crew.
Right.
So again, as part of that, just keep moving through aid stations. Try not to sit down, grab your stuff, and just keep, browse the aid station table, but keep walking, and then just you're on your way out. But yeah, eating on the road, just to try to, stock your, replenish your calories a little bit, and as you're power hiking, because there's definitely going to be sections where you're going to be running and it's a lot harder to eat. So I guess along with, this isn't course specific, this is Wasatch specific. It's got 6,000 feet of climbing and drop, which is a lot. But it's also, if you want to run it efficiently and fast, you've got to run it. And you've got to really be able to navigate the downhills quickly. And if there's ever a flat part, you've got to run it.
Right. Funny story real quick. One of my Wasatches, we were running down the road, whoa, from right after Francis Peak. And there was a guy, I was running about an 8:20 pace. I mean, for some reason, when you're going down that section, it's so easy, I think, to get going too fast.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And so I was running 8 flat, 8:20, and thinking to myself, I better slow down. Some dude passes me legit about a 5.5 minute mile.
Yeah.
And I am not kidding. I was like, he's wearing like split shorts and he's just cruising.
Yeah.
So if the funny part is I get to the aid station, that was back when they had one at the maintenance sheds. And the dude's sitting in a chair and he's like, my effing quads are blown! They're blown! It's like this heavy New York accent.
Yeah.
And I died inside laughing. Okay, so this question is about nutrition or fueling. From that perspective, how do you go about fueling at Wasatch to do like a sub 24 or go at a quicker pace?
So the first key is to race with what you've trained with, right? So don't try any new, you just heard it on the latest ultra running podcast. There's some new fueling strategy, right? So whatever your race is, spend your training time fueling the same way. I'm terrible at that, but use the same kind of stuff. So that being said, my stomach, I haven't figured it out 100% yet. My stomach is always a little bit finicky. So at the start of races, for the first 40, 50 miles, I try to eat real food as much as possible. I really enjoy peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on crappy white bread. It's easy to eat.
Uncrustables.
Uncrustables are great. One time at Scotts Pass, my pacer handed me a peanut butter sandwich and it was on whole grain.
Oh no.
Terrible, and I just puked it up immediately. It was the worst ever. So peanut butter sandwiches, I like Pringles, and Lay's ruffled chips, stuff like that. Bananas are really good.
Yeah.
And then, so I'll eat as much kind of, quote, real food as possible, because later on, when I'm not able to stomach those, then I start using the gels, you know, and I actually really like the Honey Stinger products. Lately, they go down smooth. Their gels and their chews and their waffles to some degree just seem to sit well with me.
Yeah, this is so interesting because most people I talk to are the opposite. They'll like start with gels and then they end with solid food.
Okay.
So, but here's something to point out. Everybody's different. What works for everybody's going to be a little bit different, but I think Erik hit the key, and that is you got to find out what works for you. But find out and train in your training what's going to be the best thing for you on race day.
Yeah. So what I've also found is that regardless of what my fueling strategy is, the last 20 to 30 miles, I usually just kind of live on what I call the trifecta. And each aid station I come into, I'm trying to get a cup of hot chocolate, a cup of broth, and a cup of Coke, and drink those down really quick, and then just hope I can make it to the next aid station.
Those are all amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
All three of those.
They're, I mean, just great. A little caffeine, some salt, and some sugar, you know. And you hydrate at the same time.
Next question for fueling: how much of this are you carrying, and how much of this are you grabbing at aid stations?
So if it's something specific, like if I want a specific gel, I mean, I'll grab whatever gel they have at an aid station if I need to, right? But if I like the Stinger products, then I'll always try to have at least a couple gels and maybe some chews in my bag and my pack at any time. I also like to get some of my calories through my liquids, and so I've been using the First Endurance. I forget what the drink is called, but the First Endurance products for as far as putting it in my drink. I can get some calories and some electrolytes that way. And so, say I drink, say I have two 20-ounce bottles. One of those will be water. One of those will be a electrolyte replacement drink.
Right.
So, yeah, typically as far as food goes,
from a training perspective, if you want to be faster at Wasatch or more efficient, what do you need to do in your training, or what are some of the things you do?
So obviously, if you can spend time on the course, that's pretty invaluable. Now, you're not always able to do that, but if you can spend time running on the course and getting to know all the sections, then do that, right? Because then you know what's coming, you know how you can approach it, how you can run it, and so that's going to give you a lot of confidence. And you know, you can train for the first 50 half physically, and you got to train for the second 50 mentally, right? So if you can get your mental game strong, that's going to pay huge dividends. So as far as training,
right in the middle of the trail.
So as far as training, you know, if you can spend time on the course, that's great. But then just regular training, like I think I said earlier, it's a very runnable course, right? There's a lot of vertical, a lot of up and down.
To you. Or for you.
Yeah. So, like when I was really, you know, running my fastest, a lot of my training was actually spent running the road to work and back. It's a 7-mile run to work, and I'd run to work in the morning, and then I'd run home in the afternoon, and that was really helped me with my leg turnover. It's really easy to just go for these long, slow slogs in the mountain, which you need to do, but that does not help in foot speed. And so, running fast. Yeah, so it's easy to go for these long, slow, slogs. I knew a couple of guys that would do like a 40-miler every weekend up on the, in the mountains on the course. And while that's great every once in a while, I don't think that as far as running it quickly, I don't know if that's the recipe for doing it, at least not for me.
I'm going to validate you because one of the most accomplished Wasatch runners of all time told me the exact same thing. So that's very, very interesting. And also I will validate it as well, because I think that some of my Wasatches where I went in, trained like with the most miles and the most vert, I ended up doing poorly. But if I look back on it, it was like peak bagging all summer with friends. Yeah. It's like, how good is that training? I mean, we're socializing the whole time, right? Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you gotta run fast if you want to run fast. That's sounds kind of silly and stupid, but you want to run fast, you got to run fast every once in a while. That being said, there's a lot of sections where it's more efficient to hike than to run. And I didn't realize that until I started running with a good friend that first year named Tim Spence, who's I mean, talk about legends. He's a legend of the Wasatch. And anyway, I don't know how many cheetahs he has, but you know, perennial top 20, 24-hour finisher. But we'd go on these runs, and he's just going on these, you know, I'd be trotting up the trail from Milk Upper Big Water to Dog Lake, and he's just got this long power hike stride, and he'd be going faster than I could keep up with him running. So he taught me to hike efficiently, which was huge.
Okay, so what are some of the areas of the course where you actually think it's better to hike than to run, or some people you might see running?
So unless you're like elite, like I don't know, like a Jeff Rose, I'm going kind of old school here, but, you know, or a Killian or someone like that. Does Killian run Wasatch? So basically nobody that's going to be in Wasatch. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So for all of us, there's a lot of sections that people try to run, and it just doesn't, man. So the first one we can think of is going from Sessions over to Swallow Rocks. There's just kind of some long, gentle grades, and this is when it's starting to get hot.
This is one where I'm going to hike, where Eric wanted to run.
And so, but it's about like this grade, you know,
Yeah.
very runnable. But at that point, the race is getting hot. We just power hike it.
Yeah.
The next one would be as you're going from Bald Mountain over to Alexander Springs. Again, there's just kind of some rollers before you hit Ball Bearing Hill. And I've had plenty of people pass me on those running as I'm just power hiking along. And then I think one of the more critical ones is from Alexander Springs along the power line. Again, a gentle uphill grade, kind of rolling. And so many people have passed me through there running while I'm power hiking. And then I find them at Lambs Canyon, or maybe I'll find them at Mill Creek, and they're completely blown up because they
I see it every year there.
Okay. Next section is going up Lambs Canyon Road, and then those are kind of the big ones, right? Where a little bit earlier on to mid-race, where people are still feeling a little bit frisky and thinking they're going to run it, and it ends up really biting them.
Right.
That being said, if you want to be like competitive and go for like a podium finish, you got to figure out how to be able to run those sections.
Yeah, I guess you got to figure out where can I be efficient and do this, and where it's probably experience.
Yeah,
comes into play there.
That works for me. I'll say I'm not a big gear junkie, so I'll give you two tips that work for me. As far as lighting goes, I like to have two lights. I think the lights now are so good you probably don't need two lights, but I'm old school enough that I don't have all the new stuff, and so I'll have one on my head, and then I'll have one on my waist, right? And it gives different perspective and like picks up the shadows a lot better than just a single light. The other thing I like to do with gear is I'll grab a pair of poles, like trekking poles, hiking poles at usually either Lambs Canyon or Mill Creek. I don't use it before that. I don't want to tire out my upper body and my arms. But you know, the second half of the race, when my quads are a little more tired, it can help on the uphills. And I found that it really helps me on some of the downhills, just to give my quads just a tiny little break, but enough that I feel like it makes a little bit of a difference for me.
Do you take them all the way to the finish?
Yeah, I'll take them all the way to the finish. And I'll get the collapsible ones, and sometimes I'll stick them in my pack. Most of the time I just carry them the whole time. Right. One more gear tip is sunscreen, right? I'm not a huge sunglass guy, but they definitely help. Eye fatigue can sap energy. Sunscreen, you get sunburn, that can really sap your energy. So make sure you take care of yourself that way. Food, one more food tip. The slower you're moving, the easier it is to eat, right? So if you're moving fast, you really got to simplify your foods to process a little bit better. If I'm running you know, like a slow kind of adventure,
Like a Barkley.
like a Barkley, or like
Since this guy's got a fun run. I failed to mention that earlier.
something like at Barkley, I could eat whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
Never had
Hamburgers. From the movie. Dude's eating hamburgers.
Whatever it was, you know, a huge sausage, 6-egg sausage burrito, you know. It was just whatever, because you're moving fairly slow. But the faster you go, the more you have to kind of like, at least as far as personally, I have to simplify my foods so they just digest and process
Right.
better.
Sweet. Well, I appreciate you coming out, Erik.
Yeah.
Erik is one of the legends, just one of the good guys of the Wasatch. The good guys. He's a better person than he is an ultra runner, and he's a really good ultra runner. So appreciate,
thanks.
and he's running this year.
I'm running this
So
year.
if you see Erik, say
I wore
hi.
my 10-year 2013 ago shirt. That was actually my best finish ever 10 years ago. I don't think I'm going to do quite as well this year, but we're going to walk it if nothing else.
Yeah, and I wore my 2016 shirt. I don't know, that was not one of my better years. That was one of the peak bagging years.
Yeah. Anyway, they're fun. Enjoy, everyone.